We are going straight to an EFF briefing, the media, about today's court application. Let's go there live now.
The opposition was arrested not less than 15 times for contents of his speech. So if we take this apartheid legislation and say it continues to have effect in law, it means that every time EFF leaders speak about their policies, are going to be arrested, and we cannot allow that to happen in a democratic dispensation. So we're happy in terms of the arguments that have been presented, and we're confident that when the judgment comes back, we're definitely going to be victorious, and we're going to make sure that this part of the legislation is declared unconstitutional. And one thing which South Africa must know is that the ruling party has refused to repeal more than 2,000 apartheid legislations of petty apartheid laws and substantial apartheid laws. We had proposed in Parliament that there must be an ad hoc committee that will repeal all apartheid legislation, but the ruling party voted against that motion. And we're sure that when we take over government in 2019 moving forward, we are going to make sure that ultimately we repeal all apartheid legislations. It cannot be 25 years post the end of apartheid, formal apartheid, but we're still governed by lots of apartheid legislation.
Okay, any questions?
Can I just ask one? You're also challenging the Trespass Act, and effectively what I understand you to be saying is that you don't want, where people are occupying land so-called illegally, you don't want the police to be brought in to remove those people. What is the argument there?
So the essence of our challenge to the Trespassing Act is that those who want to challenge the so-called trespassers must engage in civil legal action instead of criminal action. So the police must not be involved. There are so many remedies that people can resort to, like interdicts, like getting a court order to evict the people who have invaded certain or have like now occupied the land. Instead of calling the police to come and brutalize our people and criminalize them, let us have a civil option in terms of the law that will deal with the Trespass Act. That is the essence of the argument that we're making with regards to the Trespass Act, because it was part of the apartheid set of laws that were meant to criminalize black people. So basically what we're doing now is to undo what apartheid used as political instruments and through legislation to criminalize the existence and the movements of black people wherever they were supposed to move to here in South Africa. So it's one of the issues that we're dealing with. We're undoing apartheid through the courts because in the political space, the ruling party is not willing to undo apartheid.
And what do you say? I mean, the NPA made a whole point about this is going to cause anarchy and all of this kind of thing. How do you respond to that?
The NPA's argument is out of context altogether. So the NPA is representing narrow interest, effectively, of AfriForum in terms of what happens. There's not going to be any chaos that is going to happen here. That is why even in the EFF, in the call which the president is being charged for here, he said that let us occupy all unoccupied land. We're not just going to invade people's homes and productive farms and all of those things. That is not the policy position of the EFF. The policy position of the EFF adopted in the first National People's Assembly is that we should occupy unused land because people cannot continue to stay like pilchards, like pigs in informal settlements when nearby there is vacant land which they can occupy rightfully. And if there is sensible challenge to that, there might be some interventions, but otherwise our people must occupy land, and there's nothing wrong with that because that is what we need. That is what is long overdue in South Africa. There's not going to be any anarchy because we're not invading people's private spaces and homes and productive farms.
But by doing so, is the EFF not in essence then rendering the state ungovernable? Because why are you not part of the collective agenda to, of course, have land expropriation without compensation? In that way, you have a peaceful way where land is given back to its rightful owners.
The EFF is actually at the forefront of the constitutional process to permit for expropriation of land without compensation. The motion which Parliament is processing now is a result of the EFF motion. So we're dealing with that, but we cannot wait for that to come to an end. When you still have Deep Sloot, when you still have Alexander, when you still have Ilasimtsoli, the informal settlement, when you still have so many areas in Kayamnandi, in Stellenbosch, where people are staying like pilchards, they are staying like pigs, there's no space, there's no roads, there's absolutely nothing. And nearby there are spaces, there's vacant land which is existing either it's under private ownership or private hands. We're saying that let us occupy that land for residential purposes in the immediate, and if there's a sensible legal challenge to that, of course we'll comply with the law. But in the immediate, we are encouraging our people to occupy the land, and that doesn't replace the fact that as the EFF, we're at the forefront, we're actually leading the process of amending the constitution to permit for expropriation of land without compensation.
But is that not a recipe for violence? I mean, people are going to retaliate when their land is just invaded.
There's not going to be any violence that is going to be effected on anyone, because if people think that they are going to respond with violence against occupiers of land, then they're violating the law. But I don't think that also there is anyone who has got monopoly over violence who will prevent anyone from occupying the land because they think that they can replace the state and utilize violence. So we're not even afraid about a possibility of those who are going to have a violent reaction. We are not engaged in violence ourselves. We are not saying people must be violent. We are saying they must occupy unoccupied land and utilize it for productive purposes, because they cannot continue to be congested whilst wherever they are staying nearby there is vacant land which they must occupy.
It's a pity he's not here. Are you able to share with us where is the CIC today?
The president is in the province in Limpopo. He didn't come here today because this is not a case that generally was about litigation against him as a person. It's a collective principle of the EFF. That is why the entire leadership of the EFF was here. And one thing that must be clarified is that whatever the president of the EFF was articulating are policy positions of the organizations that were taken as resolutions in the first National People's Assembly. So the organization collectively takes ownership of what he said on our behalf in Newcastle and in Bloemfontein. So it's a case against the economic freedom fighters. And then, of course, they are utilizing the president as a conduit to try to weaken and undermine the economic freedom fighters.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Please stay for the SABC. We need languages.
Oh, okay.
All right, so that was Floyd Shivambu there speaking to the media about the goings-on in court today, the Riotous Assemblies Act, which is apartheid-era legislation, which they feel needs to be done away with. And we'll keep a track on that particular story for you.